The story begins with one of our protagonists, called Teju, rushing into the lab to tell our main protagonist, called Senku, that he wants to confess his feelings that he's held in for 5 years to Yuzuriha, his crush. Senku tells him he is not interested in his illogical decisions. However, he offers him a love potion to boost his confidence, but Teju discards it, saying he won't rely on cheap tricks. As he goes out, the love potion explodes, and Senku explains that it was actually gasoline, but he was 100% sure Teju wouldn't take it. Outside, Teju meets up with Yuzuriha to confess his feelings to her. Meanwhile, the others wager on the outcome of his proposal. At the moment Teju finally puts aside his doubts, he is interrupted by a ray of light. The light shines on the entire world, petrifying any human it touches. The world immediately falls into disarray. Only animals are spared. Teju notices he is still conscious. He vows to stay sane until he can confess his feelings. Time passes. Days, decades, centuries go by until the world plunges back into the Stone Age. One day, Teju suddenly breaks free from his petrification. As he explores the stone world, he remembers the good times with his dear Yuzuriha, who he finds still standing by the camphor tree. He confesses his feelings to the still petrified Yuzuriha, and as he goes close to her body, he notices a message carved into the tree. He finds Senku waiting for him. Senku explains to him that the date is October 5th, 5738. 3,700 years have passed since they turned to stone. Senku reveals he was counting seconds while being petrified until he broke free. He takes Teju to his base where they begin to invent tools for survival in the stone world. The next day, they go to a cave where Senku explains that the reason they were the first to wake up has something to do with the cave. Senku explains that the liquid dripping from the cave is nitric acid, which might be responsible for corroding their petrification. Senku has already started experimenting with the liquid but hasn't succeeded. They decide to make alcohol using wild grapes. Senku handles the brainy stuff while Teju does the manual labor. 3 weeks later, they have acquired alcohol, so they start distilling it. Senku's clay pot is not up to the task, so they take the slower approach. After a year, they succeed in creating a mixture which they use to depetrify a bird. Teju decides to revive Yuzuriha next with the fluid. He stops halfway, suddenly realizing she would be revived naked. He tries to take her petrified body back to their camp. However, on their way, a lion begins chasing them. The lions keep up with the chase, so Teju hands Yuzuriha's body to Senku in an act of self-sacrifice. Senku disagrees with his plan, so they continue their escape. Teju decides to use the revival fluid on a strong fighter so he can save them. The fighter, known as Shishio Tsukasa, breaks out of his petrification and defeats the lion with brute force. He tells them he'll protect them henceforth. Teju is glad to have a dependable comrade, but Senku has his doubts about their newfound ally. At the base, they introduce themselves to each other. Tsukasa volunteers to be the hunter of the team. His amazing hunting skill enables the team to eat better meat now. Senki tells the group they need calcium carbonate in order to move on with their advancement. He tells Teju to pick up seashells which they would crush to obtain its carbonate. Tsukasa narrates to Senku a childhood story where he was gathering seashells to make a necklace for his sick sister. He was beaten by a man who accused him of stealing the shells. After the story, he smashes the head of a petrified person. He tells Senku he must not revive the corrupt adults who would eventually taint their free paradise. Senku stops him, saying he is going to revive every single person in the world. Senku realizes that Tsukasa is bad news, so he plots to keep him under control by hiding the secret of the revival fluid. However, Teju runs in saying he has gotten a full pot of fluid from the cave. Senku has no choice but to tell Tsukasa about the cave. While he goes to the cave, Senku uses the opportunity to carry out the mixing, so Tsukasa doesn't see him do it. They quickly pour the processed revival fluid on Yuzuriha, but she doesn't depetrify instantly. Senku explains the science behind the fluid before Yuzuriha breaks out of the rock. Tsukasa comes back from his smashing spree to confront the group, who now take him as a murderer. Teju dashes to attack him, but Senku knows Tsukasa would kill him instantly, so he shoots an arrow between them. This disorients Tsukasa, who still manages to land a powerful hit on Teju. Tsukasa notes that Teju did not actually attack him, so he explains that he doesn't hurt people no matter what. Tsukasa is stunned by his words, so he tests him, threatening to kill Yuzuriha. Teju takes up her defense but collapses from the injury sustained by blocking Tsukasa's attack. Tsukasa decides not to fight, so he leaves the group and heads into the forest. Senku begins to destroy their base. He tells the group they need to fake their exit if they are to successfully make a weapon that will be able to stop Tsukasa. They set out on a journey to find raw materials for their weapon. Tsukasa arrives at the base but catches on instantly to what Senku was trying to achieve. The group arrives at the peak of a mountain. Here Senku tells them they have arrived to obtain gunpowder. Atop the mountain, Teju and Yuzuriha relax in a hot spring. Here, he tells her he would finish their conversation from 3,700 years ago after they bring back civilization. Senku has obtained sulfur, charcoal, and potassium nitrate, which are the materials needed to make gunpowder. They start processing the materials together. Teju accidentally sets off a spark which causes an explosion. Teju is in shock of its explosive power, so Senku verifies that he isn't going to war with Tsukasa, and explains how he plans to use the gunpowder as leverage to make a deal. As they converse, they notice a smoke signal from the forest. Senku realizes that there are other people apart from them in the stone world. They decide to increase the explosion to send their own signal, but end up revealing their position to Tsukasa. He quickly adopts Yuzuriha, using her as a bargaining chip to obtain the secret of the revival fluid, so Yuzuriha decides to play the sacrificial lamb. Senku knows he would be killed if he tells Tsukasa the formula. However, he tells him anyway. Tsukasa gives a condition to spare Senku's life if he swears to abandon science. Senku gets a flashback from his childhood. After observing his interest in science, his father sells his car to provide equipment for him. Senku begins trying out different experiments from a young age along with Teju. He even tried building a rock. Senku refuses Tsukasa's proposal. He tells him to make his death painless, so Tsukasa assures him that he'll crush his cervical nerve in one go. Teju runs to Senku's aid but is too late. As they sob, Tsukasa is wary that Teju would confront him in anger. Teju lifts a huge rock which he throws in the air to distract Tsukasa from Yuzuriha, who tosses the newly developed gunpowder. Their actions create a planned explosion. Tsukasa is unhurt by the explosion, but Teju and Yuzuriha along with Senku's body escape successfully. Teju tries different approaches to revive Senku but fails. He recalls a childhood memory. From the memory, he realizes that Senku would never actually sacrifice himself for anyone. Teju starts racking his head for clues. They recall that Senku was always cracking his neck all along. They take a look at his body and discover a petrified potion on his neck. The revival fluid is known to heal the areas that are petrified, so they apply some in hopes that it would heal his neck. In his death, Senku relives memories from when he woke up in the stone world. He started making tools to survive from scratch. He acquired sharp objects, ropes, made fire, made clothes, and a mini house for himself. Senku starts feeling the weight of his exhaustion, so he decides to look for a helping hand. He goes to dig up Teju's body. Then he begins looking for clues in order to undo the petrification. He surmised that there had to be an external factor that played a role in his revival, and so he discovers the cave flowing with nitric acid. He tries it on Teju, but the petrification doesn't break, so he began experimenting on birds and other humans. Back in the present, it's morning. Teju and Yuzuriha wake up to see that Senku has come back to life. They're excited to see him, and Teju almost breaks his back with a hug. Later, Senku explains to the others that since Tsukasa thinks he is dead, he intends to stay that way. He orders Teju and Yuzuriha to infiltrate his camp as spies. Senku explains that he will go to seek allies with the mysterious people that sent the smoke signal. Tsukasa encounters a lady. She attacks him instantly, although he doesn't have an issue blocking her attacks. She tells him she witnessed him capture Yuzuriha and kill Senku. Tsukasa realizes that she could pose a danger to his goals, so he makes a tree fall on her. Senku rushes to her location to find her trapped under a huge tree, so he begins crafting a pulley which he uses to lift the log off her and set her free. She introduces herself as Kohaku. She tells Senku she has taken a liking to him, but Senku quickly clears the air that he is not interested in relationships. At night, Senku notices that she is on guard. He tells her he wouldn't even think to assault a lioness like her in her sleep. However, Kohaku explains that it's already a habit of hers to be cautious. She tells Senku she would help him defeat Tsukasa by introducing him to more allies. The next day, she goes to fetch some hot spring water to deliver to her village. She hasn't recovered from her battle with Tsukasa, so Senku offers to help her. Surprisingly, he's not able to move the pot, so he makes a contraption to help them move the pot down the hill. They arrive at the entrance of the village. Senku is surprised that so many people are already living there. He is suddenly attacked by two boys but is shielded by Kohaku, who tells them that he saved her life. The boys, called Kinro and Jinro, explain that it's against the village rules to allow strangers in. Senku makes a lot of bubbles using soap, making the warriors are confused as they have never seen such a thing before. Chrome appears on the scene introducing himself as a sorcerer. He figures out that the bubbles are no threat. He then confronts Senku in a duel of sorcery. Chrome makes a fire and begins his sorcery by changing its colors, but Senku isn't impressed by